I never really worried too much about money. I mean, I didn't have a lot of means, but again, I was working 2, 3 jobs at the time. And I just knew that whatever I needed, I would continue to work and be able to support myself.
I imagine you're somebody that if you were to win the lottery, you would continue working.
Yes.
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 Why?
7 children, no retirement plan was no.
Ann-Marie Bomba built her career by saying yes when others wouldn't. Entering multifamily during the 2009 recession, she became the person who'd relocate anywhere to solve a problem. Now, balancing career with 2 young children, she's redefining leadership, encouraging risk-taking, while recognizing that life doesn't divide neatly between work and home. It's all one journey with shifting priorities. For Ann-Marie, success isn't about avoiding mistakes, but recovering gracefully when they happen.
I've met a lot of people in this industry over the last 36 years, and I can't tell you one person that said this was their life's goal is to get into this industry, but it is life-changing for so many people. It's great to see all of the individuals that get into it as part-time leasing or leasing and then move up through the ranks. It's based on hard work and how much you want to put into it, just grit. You can rise through the ranks.
Would you mind if I ask you about when you were 14 and what happened?
I don't share that very often, but I did move out kind of early. I was 14 when I left home, so it was not a great home life, just not a very good relationship between the parents. It wasn't a place where I felt like I belonged. Substance abuse, neglect, just not a very...
Ann-Marie, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
Awesome. Well, maybe we can get started with a little bit about your background. So maybe where you grew up and your early childhood and what that looked like.
Sure. Let's see. So I grew up kind of between mostly South Texas. So between Corpus, from the time I was about 3 to 12, moved to San Antonio, kind of worked in that market or lived and worked in that market for 26 years and then moved to Dallas.
Okay. And what was, do you have any siblings or anything like that?
I do. I'm the oldest of 3. So I have
Okay.
2 younger brothers and they're 5 and 8 years apart. So it was interesting and I was a great, I guess, built-in babysitter.
What was your guys' relationship like? I have 2 siblings, but 3 of us total. And we definitely fought quite a bit growing up. Not anymore. What was that like for you?
Yeah. No, it was great. I mean, I enjoyed being, of course, the oldest and having brothers. I don't know what I would have done with sisters because we would have had to share things, but with brothers, it was great. We were really close. I did move out kind of early. I was 14 when I left home. So we reconnected later on and built really strong relationships. I'm close to both today.
Where did you move?
Interestingly enough, I did a lot of couch surfing. I did a lot of roommates and kind of was situationally homeless for quite some time. And so I fell into this business at 17 and decided I was going to be in the apartment business until I figured out what I wanted to do in life. And here it's 30-something years later and I'm still here. So
Wow. So you chose to
yes.
leave home. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you fell into the business at 17?
I did. Yes. I was very lucky. I was looking for an apartment. At that time, you had to be 18, but I had a co-signer. I was 17 and went and toured a property with a friend of mine. The manager was kind of in a bind, and she's like, you ask a lot of great questions. You want a job. It's only part-time. It's weekends, and you would be leasing. And so I kind of fell into it. About a month and a half into working just weekends and 1 day a week, I was like, this is really fun. So I decided to go ahead and pursue working for another company full-time.
So you had no plans of getting in the industry, just found this job. Why
None
is that such a
whatsoever.
classic story, I feel like? I never hear the story of like, I was a 10-year-old kid and I dreamed of becoming a leasing agent. And I just feel like that, yeah, this is a cool thing about this industry where you can kind of just fall into it and through hard work and through good connection and, whatever else, luck, if you want to call it luck, rise through the ranks, right? And I think that's just really cool.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I've met a lot of people in this industry over the last 36 years, and I can't tell you one person that said this was their life's goal is to get into this industry, but it is life-changing for so many people. And it's great to see all of the individuals that get into it as part-time leasing or leasing and then move up through the ranks. It's based on hard work and how much you want to put into it. And just grit, and you can rise through the ranks.
You were a leasing agent. You said part-time. You started part-time.
Yes.
And then when did you transition full-time?
So it was about a month and a half in after getting a little bit of experience, and I decided this was an industry that I definitely wanted to pursue. It was nice. I was real excited to learn about commissions and super driven to make this, a career and see how I could be successful. And of course, the benefit of having an apartment discount and having a place to live was always obviously a bonus. So
Why were you so driven to make
um,
this work?
well, I think it was about the relationships. I mean, early on, my first experience was at a property, and I met so many people, like the residents, the vendors, the uh, maintenance people, the team. It just felt so collaborative, and I just it was intriguing to me because I've always been a people person, and so I really enjoyed kind of just that side of them, and really service driven as well. So it was nice to be able to see people excited about getting a home, and uh, just watching them, you know, eh, different life experiences, seeing couples come in, seeing families, young families get started. So it was just exciting to me.
Growing up, what did your parents do for work?
So my mom actually did um, kind of administrative work. She worked for a couple different organizations, bookkeeping, and my father, my stepdad, was in the what would it be like transportation business, so leasing trucks and transport.
You're a leasing agent. At what point do you? Because I'm really curious when people say they fall into the industry, but do they intentionally stay, or is it just like I'm a leasing agent now, I'm a property manager now, I'm a regional manager? What was that like for you? Like, were you thinking, oh, I want to, which we'll get to, start your own property management company, or where? Like, what I'm trying to understand at 17 or 18, where was your ambition? Like,
So growing up, I always thought I was either going to be a truck driver, obviously because of the transportation, or a criminal defense attorney. That was kind of like my reach. I really was interested in law and thought I would pursue that, but due to my personal situation at home, my plans changed a little bit, and so I was lucky enough to fall into this industry. I don't know that I really thought it was going to be long term. It was just interesting at the time, and as I was working through it and meeting different people and had great leaders, I just saw a future with it and advanced quickly. So again, starting at 17 as part-time leasing, went into full-time leasing. I think within a year, I was already an assistant manager. By 19, I was a property manager. So it escalated quickly.
and this is before people even start, because normally they'll start at 22 or
We
20.
have a lot of people that enter kind of like post high school, part time job for college while they're working through, going to school, because we can be flexible with weekends and during the week when they're taking classes. So we do see a lot of students.
Okay. When you think about either within the industry or even growing up, some of the early influences or role models, who do you think about, and are they people that you know? Are they people that you've read about?
I would say a lot of the people that influence me, I mean, like, I'd like to look at people that are creative and entrepreneurial and service driven. I'd like to learn more about their experiences and just kind of see what drives them. So I guess that's.
Yeah. Did you read a lot growing up, or do you read a lot now?
No, I do listen to a lot of podcasts.
Oh, you do listen to a lot of podcasts.
I
Okay.
listen to a lot of podcasts. Yeah, because I love to hear the different stories. I like to hear how people start out. It's usually very different than what you expect, and just see kind of how they connect.
What are some of the podcasts you've listened to?
Well, my guilty pleasure is true crime. I do listen to those. I do listen to Multifamily Matters and some of the other industry specific podcasts, and then just ones on, different books. Like I'll listen to the books on Headway and just kind of do those 15-minute increments. So
Yeah, there's two. If you like to learn about, how people start things, there's two podcasts that I'd recommend. One is this podcast called How I Built This.
uh-huh.
Have you listened to that?
I have heard a couple of episodes of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's by this guy Raz, who does a really good job of basically narrating a lot of consumer companies more, but the starting journey and the highs and the challenges and all of that stuff. And then there's this more modern version of How I Built This, because How I Built This is one of the early OG podcasts for starting a company or entrepreneurship. This podcast called Founders, and it's just by this guy called David Senra, and he reads a biography every week and basically talks about the biography and the person. And what's really cool is he's now 400, maybe 380 episodes in.
Wow.
Meaning he's read at least 380 biographies. And what's really, really cool about it is he's able to kind of pattern match what Steve Jobs did in his 20s versus, Larry Ellison or Elon Musk, and create this kind of interweb of personalities and stories. And I think that's really cool. So yeah, I think I was telling you right before we started recording that podcasts for me have been super influential. And I think the reason why I like podcasts more is it's really easy to listen to something because there's so much downtime. Like you're driving,
Right.
you're like walking your dog, you're walking outside, you're, there's so much of that, like, I don't know the word for it, but downtime or median time where you can just like absorb information. So.
Oh, I love that. I'll have to check that out. I mean, we would watch on Discovery Channel, like How I Made This, and you'd see all the different stories of like Hershey and like Kellogg's and just some of these early pioneers in their fields. And so that's always been intriguing to me.
I love it. Okay. So let's go from, so you said by 19 you were what was it? A property manager.
Yes.
Okay. What was the next leap?
I stayed in that property manager space for quite some time, moved into a regional. I think I was probably late 20s when I became a regional. So property manager, did conventional and then affordable, and so worked the different types of assets, and then became a regional over 5-6 properties. Then it was 12 to 14 properties, and started just kind of going through those different challenges of seeing things from different. Again, when you're working in the affordable space or conventional or brand new lease ups, they all have different challenges. So I found that very intriguing and loved to learn about that, but really wanted to focus more from a client's perspective and an owner's perspective and start thinking from that mindset versus an operations standpoint. And so I think that was kind of when things shifted for me. So I could either go into like an asset manager type role, or really try to figure out how to better support on the operations side. And so I think that's the trajectory that led me to starting my own management company, is just kind of figuring out like, what are the challenges? Why are certain property management companies successful? Why are others not successful? I mean, the end of the day, it's always people driven, but it's also processes too. Like, what are the processes that make sense? What are the things that are just kind of background noise? What is really important from a client's lens versus an operations lens versus a residence lens? And just understanding all of the ways and just putting that together in a platform and a format that made sense, where we could easily perform and operate in a manner that met expectations at every level.
So when you say people, because that's a good question. I've never really thought about that. Like, you have, similar to tech companies, right? Like, you have to differentiate yourself, similar to property management companies, especially with third party and you're selling to other ownership groups, you have to differentiate yourself.
Right.
So can you expand on the people versus process, and like, what does that actually mean in terms of making a property management company great?
Sure. Well, I can say that working for the different organizations that I did, I had some excellent training. I worked for some of the largest management companies, and then I worked for some owner operators. And I think the takeaways with all of that is how how processes work. And so I started really studying processes as far as like what makes it, what are the challenges in larger organizations? How can you streamline things in smaller organizations? How do you have like institutional quality operators in a nimble platform? Like how can you make processes easier to where it's not just about checking boxes, but it's actually a system that is easy to maneuver, that can that operators can kind of pivot in based on the client needs instead of just here's our box as a property management company and we do things A, B, C, D. How do we effectively hire the right top talent and put them into a platform that's nimble enough to where each of the clients have different goals for their assets and their investment strategies, and how do we as operators, how are we able to best meet those expectations?
Is it possible for a property management company to be great but have completely different processes? Or is there a standard process that makes a property management company great?
I think there's certain core values that every company needs to establish early on and have buy-in from all of their leadership teams. And I think that's very important because what you don't want to do is create an environment that is just, 15 different companies within an organization, because then you lose what makes you unique. But I think if you can establish boundaries and operating philosophies but also give the operators the autonomy to make some of those slight changes based on what the client's expectations and needs are, I think that's a good recipe to follow.
If you were to choose, I'm just curious because I feel like when you start a company, the company is really just a reflection of the founder's values most often, right?
Yes.
If you're super organized, the company is likely going to be from the inside and outside look very organized. If you're not and you're unstructured, it's probably going to look like that. What would you say your like values are if you were to sum it up, and how did that reflect in the companies and the property management companies you started?
Sure. I would say that it's definitely about being a servant leader and about transparency. And I think that is what I really look for in other leaders when I hire and expand is I want people that are completely transparent and that are servant leaders and that are leading from every level. Because at the end of the day, what I always tell the teams is we are only in place to support the operators at the property. And I don't want to ever have a leader in my organization that doesn't realize that that is the key and the number one. Because if we're not supporting them correctly, giving them the tools and the training and the ability to function and to operate their property successfully, then we're failing. We're failing our clients, our residents, our vendors, our stakeholders. So that to me has got to be at the core of what we do. And so it's not just about my values, it's also about putting the right leadership in place that has those same core values.
I feel like because you've seen almost every like layer or function or been involved in every layer or function, what has been the hardest like leap and why is it hard? I feel like I have a hunch because I've heard the answer before from others, but I'm curious to know what you think.
I think the hardest thing for me, because I was wired to be the doer and fix all of the problems, is when I started moving into a leadership role and realizing it was no longer my responsibility to be the doer, but to be the person who could support the people that are actually needing to do those tasks and meet those expectations. That
And
was the hardest.
when you say the doer, meaning like you are the individual contributor actually doing the work versus
Correct.
like how do you facilitate the work to be done through others?
Correct.
Okay, then
Yeah.
that's hard. So management in some way is that
The management and the
yeah.
leadership side, I think, was the hardest transformation for me.
Okay. In talking with our mutual friend Ed, he mentioned you have 6 kids,
We have 7.
7 kids.
Yes.
Okay, he got it wrong by 1. I have 0 kids.
Okay.
I can't imagine running a company and doing anything with even 1 kid. So I have to understand how you manage all of this.
Ooh, I think I was fortunate because we're a blended family. My husband says it's mergers and acquisitions. We're both in the business, so that's his takeaway. But so we did blend. I had 4 children, and then I was blessed with 3 additional children, and they've really made it easy for us. I mean, we do work long hours. Um, but they all see that work ethic and that drive, and I think that made them in some ways self-sufficient, but also very driven. So we were lucky.
What is the age? How old are all the kids?
Youngest one is 20 and the oldest one is 30.
Okay. So, and you started TAM in 2015.
Yes.
So 10 years ago.
Yes.
So the youngest one was 10, the oldest one was 20.
Yes.
Okay. So now what I want to understand is 10 to 20. You started this company. There's 7 kids. But what is like, how do you do that? And I didn't know your husband also works. So like, how does that actually, because I want people to understand what that actually looks like. And how do you manage that? Like what does a day-to-day look like?
Back 10 years ago?
Yeah.
3 trips to different schools, and each time one got a driver's license, they got an additional like sibling to take to school and to transport. Several of our kids were in sports and extracurricular activities. So not only was it just about facilitating them back and forth to school, also their extra curriculars. And my husband and I definitely prioritized that because we knew that at the time it felt like it was an eternity, but we also knew those times were gonna come and go. So we really tried to plan our work travel and things around their events just to make sure that we were there and we were present for them. So.
And what? So you mentioned your husband's also in the industry.
Yes.
What does he do, and how did you guys meet?
Well, we met through the industry, and he was more on the asset management side. So our paths crossed at one of the larger organizations that we worked for back in 2006, and started out with a friendship, and then eventually evolved. And we started dating probably 3 or 4 years after we had first met, and dated for a couple of years, and then we got married, and here we are today. So
Outside of it, like when you think about how, like what work means to you, I imagine you're somebody, this is a guess, but I imagine you're somebody that if you were to win the lottery, you would continue working.
yes.
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 Why?
7 children, no retirement plan was no. I just think it's part of my DNA. I don't think I can imagine a world where I feel purposeful through the work I do and to give back to others. And now what I find most passionate about is developing other leaders in the organization. So I think first it was like survival to just existence. And now I feel like this is the point in my career where I give back, and that brings me tremendous joy.
So when you talk about developing other people, I was just chatting with somebody about turning people around, right? In some ways, I'm of the belief that you can't change people through learned experience. What is your view on that, first of all? And then if you believe you can turn people around, how do you do it?
So because of my diverse background and challenges that I had, adversity early on in life, I think I view people a little bit differently. I always look to see kind of who they are at their core, and everybody has value, everybody has a purpose, and I think they behave the best or can be their best selves when they're being true to who they are. So I always just look for those core values and how do you support people, find the good in the people and help them get to where they're feeling a sense of purpose and seen and valued and heard. So,
would you mind if I ask you about when you were 14 and what happened?
Sure. I don't share that very often, but I just, yes, it's fine.
What happened?
There was, it was not a great home life. There was just not a lot of good example setting in my household. Substance abuse, neglect, just not a very good relationship between the parents. And so it just was not, it wasn't a place where I felt like I belonged. So,
But it's a lot of burden to, as a 14-year-old, to be on your own. And where did you go?
so I had some really good friends and some parents, and they took me in for a little bit. And then I ended up meeting a side of my family that I didn't really know. So my dad's side of the family, I didn't meet him until I had already left home, and so started building a relationship with that side. Lived with a grandmother that I had just met for probably right under a year, and then at 15, it was completely independent. So moved with roommates and just started getting into different roles. Worked retail for a little bit. Tried restaurant wait staff. Horrible, horrible. Did not work out well for me, and so kind of stumbled around through different industries until I found the apartment industry. And really, it's what put me on the path that I started, turned my life around. So
And were you supporting yourself financially at 15?
yes, yes.
So you were fully supporting yourself financially and
With some roommates. I mean,
Yeah.
I
Well,
lots of odd jobs and things like that. But yes,
what is going through your head at that age? 'Cause you're going to
survival? Just how to make something out of myself, I guess.
and you're going to you're in high school.
I actually completed my 10th grade year because I was living with a grandmother and at the beginning of the year. So I was able to complete my 10th grade year. And then when I went to register for my 11th grade, because I wasn't living with an adult and I wasn't emancipated, I was not able to continue. So they turned me away. So I went the GED route and continued just working 3, 4 jobs, whatever it took to make ends meet.
Do you think a lot of your drive today and in your 20s and 30s and beyond is from feeling what you felt and not wanting to feel that again?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, yeah. And just because of feeling financially insecure and yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it was interesting because, I mean, while I knew that and I lived with friends in between and just different things, roommates, situations. So I never really worried too much about money. I mean, I didn't have a lot of means, but again, I was working 2, 3 jobs at the time. And I just knew that whatever I needed, I would continue to work and be able to support myself.
How has your relationship with money changed? Has it changed in terms of what you?
I wouldn't say that. I mean, I was never super into the material things. I mean, it was just necessity based. I would say what I splurge on today probably is travel more than anything because I didn't really do much of that at a young age. So that's kind of my splurge.
So when we talk about 2015, where were you at before you started TAM?
I was working for a company out of Houston, and it was a small organization. I was a regional manager there for a couple of years, and then parted ways with that company, decided I was going to get my real estate license at the time, and then ran into some mutual friends. And she connected me with a couple of other individuals, and they decided they wanted to start a management company. So that had never hit my radar.
You weren't even thinking about
Not
that.
even thinking about it at all. But this is somebody who had just sold her company and had a friend who was a property management in the accounting. So she had been a CFO of another property management company before. and another person who was like in the training and operations side for a company. And so ironically, we were all available at the time and started talking about, you know, our experiences in the property management arena, what we wanted to do, what did the future look like, and just really had a lot of alignments on kind of what we enjoyed about the different organizations that we had worked for. If we were going to form our own company, what would that look like? What would the mission be? And core values. And so we started TAM. Like, it felt like a whirlwind. I think within 2 months we had the company up and going, and we were looking for opportunities for third party.
How does that work when you start a property management company? So because I imagine you can't solicit from companies you've worked with in the past, or can you?
There's a lot of NDAs.
There's a lot of.
We were not, none of us at the time were under an NDA, or I'm sorry, a non-compete. None of us had a non-compete in place. And really, it was just about past relationships that we had with different people. And so once we started telling them that we were, starting this management company, what we were looking to achieve, we just started kind of networking, and through the networking picked up a couple of opportunities. And then those opportunities, we got in and proved ourselves. And so we earned a little bit more and a little bit more. And so eventually it was down to just two of us partners. And Wendy and I started TAM. I think our first client gave us an opportunity. We worked through that. It was a short-term assignment, and then picked up a couple more properties and eventually grew it to north of 17,000 units before we sold. So,
Wow.
yeah.
It's wild.
It was a wild ride. It was great.
It's so cool because I actually don't think of course I've talked to founders on the tech side, but I've never talked to somebody who started a property management company. So I have a bunch of questions. When you look at I think at least when you start a tech company, the hardest thing is like the beginning. Maybe not the hardest thing, but one of the hardest things is the beginning, because you're basically going from like nothing to like something. In other words, like 0 to 1. And it's such an aggressive leap of like getting your first customer or like making that transition. What was it like for you? So you mentioned you guys there was 3 partners?
There was 4 of us originally.
4 partners. Okay.
Yes.
So what was the early days like? How did you divide the roles? Like, who was responsible for what?
Yeah.
How did you support yourself? Because I imagine you gave up your income, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
There was no income.
There's no income.
And everything that we made actually went back into the company. So, I mean, it was a commitment in the beginning.
So you were pulling from your savings and...
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what did the 4 partners do? What was each person's role?
So the one that put us all together, like I said, had just sold her company. So she was making the financial investment in the beginning. And then we had one partner who was doing the books for us. So she set all of that up. And then we had Wendy and myself. And it was interesting because we were the only 2 from the operations side. So I really thought there was going to be some overlap of like roles and responsibilities. But really, she was more on the marketing and the training and the developing side, where I was all in on operations. And so it really complemented each other.
Do you remember some early conflicts that you guys had, if at all?
We did. It was a decision because in the beginning, we were trying to decide if we were going to purchase properties, the 4 of us. And so we did our first LOI. We went and looked at a couple of properties. We put our earnest money down. So it was becoming real fast. Mm-hmm. And then there was some things that we learned about the assets that made it not a viable investment. So we backed off of that. And through the course of that, we started realizing that there was some misalignment in some of the partners, and just one wanted to go in with all purchasing. Wendy and I were a little bit hesitant on that. If it didn't make sense, we weren't going to force it. So there was just some misalignments. And so we decided to Wendy and I carry and move everything forward. But it was a new relationship. So that was kind of, when you say conflict, it's, you've got a new partner and you really have to build that trust and in order to make it last. And she was a phenomenal partner. So I think we achieved a lot, and it was definitely a very interesting ride.
Of course, yeah. So 17, and so how many of those units were owned versus managed?
So interestingly enough, after about 4 or 5 years of us having TAM doing nothing but third party, one of our clients came to us and said, "Hey, I'd like to, I'm very interested in what you guys are doing. I'd love to have some to join your partnership." And so we talked about it, and we said, it makes sense. And so we were able to grow with that person and organization. And that's really what led to the trajectory of the unit count. I mean, I think we took over 56 properties in like 18 months. It was insane. It was crazy.
What is it like taking over a property or taking over 56 properties? What all needs to happen? You need a transfer.
So hiring, bringing on people, the training, I mean, you're really at that pace, you're growing so rapidly that you're just bringing on people, and it's just constant training, developing. And then you realize you need more support people. And so you've got all these various departments that you're creating, because we also created some additional departments because we were running affordable and conventional, and we were doing revenue management. And so we were building departments as we were bringing on properties, training the teams, getting everybody ready, and then just kind of moving on quickly. So
At any point in time, did you feel like you had imposter syndrome at all?
oh, absolutely. I mean, I think that's just part of it. And I've talked to so many different industry leaders, and it was really interesting to see how many people had suffered from that, because when you're in it, you're just, I don't know, you just feel the weight of the world on your shoulders. And so it's like, okay, am I ready for this? Is this something? So yeah, I think I suffered through that, and through different mentors and people, industry professionals, and just people that I really look up to, realized that they kind of normalized that for me and said, we all go through this.
Who were some of the people that you looked up to at that time?
Oh, there's quite a few. I had, Ed, he's always been amazing. He's been a sounding board for me for many different situations. And who else would I go to? I have a friend, Dawn Way, who also started her own property management company, and kind of, it was funny because we had worked for the same company before, and we were peers, and then kind of lost contact, and then realized that we had both individually started management companies. And when we reconnected, it was the similarities between the two organizations were very interesting. We were very, very similar.
Really?
And I mean, even the software that we were using, the vendor partners that we were connected with, just because she and I had such a strong, like, our core values were very, very aligned. So she's phenomenal, and she's always been a great sounding board. Elizabeth Francisco, that started Resman. I mean, I've met her started out as a client. She became somebody that I just absolutely cherish, because she's been through so much, and just seeing women kind of pioneering in their fields, and just raising the bar. So there's lots of great ladies to look up to.
It's really interesting. You mentioned a lot of vendor partners as people. I didn't expect that, actually.
Yeah.
Okay. That's the cool thing about this industry. It seems like if you're in it long enough, I think the word that people don't like using is vendor, but more like partner, I guess. Mm-hmm. If you were to start like another property management company 10 years later, is it the same? Are we in the same world, or is it because of the tech stack, all of that's evolved? Could you just like run the same playbook, or how would it look different?
No, I think our industry is evolving rapidly at this point, and mostly because of AI technology and some things that have been introduced that, when I got in the business 36 years ago, we didn't even know what a computer was. So in my career, it's been pretty pretty amazing to see the evolution. But I would say in this last 5-year window, it's evolved so quickly um, that it's a very different world. And so you got to keep up with things rapidly. You've got to try different solutions. You've got to look into and know about all of the resources that are available for you. So the company that I'm now a partner with after selling TAM, we have a 40-person centralization team, and they've been a team together for north of 12 years. So this was put into place way before that was a buzzword in our industry. And so they're absolutely incredible. So learning about them and how they support our properties and the company and the different assets has been incredible. And then we introduced AI technology. So you've got the centralized team, you've got the AI, and you've got the operations team. So blending all of that together and then figuring out how everything is handed seamlessly and what those processes look like. So I think it's ever evolving.
The company that acquired Tim was Strategic Properties, or no? That's
No.
separate.
It's a separate company.
Okay,
Yeah.
yep. So what is so 12 years ago they had a centralized team.
Yes.
That's super early.
Very early.
What? Why? How?
Is the two founding partners actually are developers, and so they own some smaller assets, and they're based in Miami. And so, we had some small multifamilies and some individuals, and they had an asset in Georgia that was a small property, and they had a property manager that they absolutely adored. Well, she was from Bogota, Colombia, and had to move back. And so when she went to tender her resignation, they started having conversations, and they didn't want to lose her. So they started just kind of really figuring out, what do you do on a day-to-day basis, and watching all of her processes and what really had to be done, under that roof, what could be done remotely with, technology, cloud. And so they were watching all of these things, and they just started writing processes. So when she moved back officially, she had kind of a list of things that she could still do and support the property operations, but she could do it remotely instead of there. So they started seeing success with that. Their friends, word started spreading. And so they were able to obtain some more third-party relationships, and they started supporting those. And so she really built this 40-person team that's divided up into 5 different departments based on KPI, and started supporting these and just started seeing the success in the operations. And so it's lowering payroll on the property side. It's still supporting those smaller assets that typically would be underserved, if you will, because, if you got a one-person property and that person's out sick or on vacation, and the door's closed and business stops. Well, in this case, you've got 5 different people moving things forward. You've got somebody in rent, leasing that's taking the leasing calls and tours, and then you've got the rent collection person, and you've got, customer service. So all of these things kept going. And so that's kind of how this started. It was really with one individual, and how do we keep this person, and that loyalty that grew into the Central's, support team. So
You said in the last 5 years, so much has changed. Like with AI, where do you think the next 5 years and 10 years is going? Like, what world do you think we're going to be in with property management and AI's influence?
I don't know. I mean, I think we're going to have so much data available to us that it's really going to be, it's going to help streamline a lot of things. But I do think that I think the companies that are still going to be successful are the ones that can figure out how to leverage all of the AI tools and all the benefits of that, but still offer best in class customer service. Because at the end of the day, it's a people business. And so I think just making sure that everybody, it's centered around those people relationships.
Just because you have such a strong lens on the industry, where do you feel like technology companies are not investing in the right AI tooling, right? Like there's rent collections, there's lead nurture tooling. What are people overlooking?
question.
I'll give you an example. Somebody, I've asked this question before, just in conversation, and one of the use cases that was brought up was building, like almost like using AI to write like a monthly investor update of some sort, or not, maybe not monthly, but when I think about my own business, we have to do investor updates, of course. And I'm like, wow,
Right.
that would be so useful if we had all the, it was plugged into the HubSpot CRM and all the data sources and the revenue. And it could just write this investor update, and then I can update it. So I'm just curious, like examples like that where, it's a time consuming task that's energy draining. I feel like the obvious ones are, of course, we look at lead nurturing. But is there anything that comes to mind that's less obvious?
Nothing comes to mind right now. No. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm still kind of early. Like I'm just scratching the surface. I'm learning about all these different AI tools, and I think you could make it a full-time job to learn about all of the technology advancements and things that are coming, and how those are going to impact, and what we can plug in, and what's really useful.
What is that RFP on the obviously we're a tech company, so we are doing demos and selling our product. But on the other side of things, when you're a property management company and you have 5 different tools that you have to choose between, or 10 different tools that you have to choose between, what does that look like? What is that process like? And how do you run it effectively?
So we do a lot of pilots because, I mean, the word integration does not mean the same thing across all the platforms. So as we're looking to solve for a solution, let's just say it's fraud protection, or it's, rent payment collections, or just the different tools. So we'll look at kind of our property management software and see what does that integration look like, and how seamless is it, and what are the manual steps that have to be made through the teams. And so we beta test those and just make sure that it is a good solution. But you could have 5 or 6 different choices. And then where I think it really comes into place, or what I've seen now, is you'll have one vendor provider that will do 2 or 3 solutions, and then you'll have the other one that does 5, but they do 2 of these things, or there's some overlap. And so you really have to kind of figure out which tool or which vendor solution that you want to be all in on. And I think it's really hard to figure out, maybe this vendor partner does 3 of these 5 things exceptionally well, and you like those products. Are you willing to take kind of the inferior on the other 2 when there's another superior product, but then you're not having to use 4 or 5 different vendor solutions? It's plugging all in.
I want to end with one question. What does success mean to you now after, starting a property management company, selling it, having 7 kids? I feel like there's so much here. Like, how do you define success?
I think it's the mark that you leave on others and what you give back, and kind of how success to me is what I've given back to others. And I think that's what brings me joy. I really like doing some of the volunteer work that I've got, but I really like also seeing leaders move up, and I love to educate others that the apartment industry can offer so much in the way of career path, whether it's through the operations side, the vendor side, there's so many different roads that you can go down, and it can be an amazing career. And so I think success to me is just watching our industry evolve, and then watching the individual people just grow within the organizations.
Ann-Marie, thank you. Thanks for being on. I know you don't talk about some of the things you talk about often, so I appreciate you opening up for what it's worth. I think people are going to listen and definitely take value from it if that gives you comfort in sharing what you shared. So
Thank you, Shiv.
it's a super inspiring story, to be completely candid. I've never just the transition from your upbringing and starting a company, and it's just really inspiring. So I'm really excited for people to listen, and thank you for sharing.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the experience.
Awesome. Thanks.